Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Folks, we're learning more and more about this attack in New Orleans on Bourbon Street. We look at the thumbnail on the screen. That is the picture of the attacker, Shamsud Din Jabbar, who is a U.S. citizen, a United States Army veteran, somehow was radicalized to perform this horrific attack. As we learn more and more about this attack, we learn more and more about the vulnerabilities that in large gatherings that we are all subjected to. And were there mistakes made in New Orleans? Yes, there were mistakes made. And something as simple as what you see on the screen, security ballards that would block a vehicle from entering a location. These were present in the street, but guess what? They weren't present on the sidewalk. So the offender, the perpetrator, this man here just simply drove around those ballards and created the carnage that we know occurred during this horrific attack. And now we know that as each hour and each day passes, the number of people that have died, it's up to 15 now, and between 35 people injured, and that could rise also. So this is a horrific attack. And many talking heads on television have said, terrorists only have to get it right once. However, law enforcement has to get it right every single time. And that is one of the most profound statements I have heard. And I think as we move away from the 9/11 attacks, which were 23 years ago on September, coming up on 24 years, we lose our sharpness. We sort of lose what the things that we learned during 9/11. And I know we say it over and over and over again. If you see something, say something. And that also applies to law enforcement and sharing information and working together. You hear them use the word partnerships all the time. And that is so, so serious in this day and age with so much strife, so much political angst, so much violence going on throughout this world, that law enforcement has to get it right every single time. And any vulnerabilities that we have, the gap of vulnerabilities has to be closed. And again, we have to do it right every single time. So folks, hold on to your hats, hold on to your drink, hold on to your loved ones, hold on to your next door neighbor. You're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off the cuff zone, the police off the cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
And now, a word from our sponsor. BetOnline continues to be the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting. From the earliest odds to in-game live betting, BetOnline provides you with all the action and the ability to watch the games as they happen. With the largest selection of odds on everything from football, the NBA and college basketball, NHL to UFC. Head to BetOnline today and don't forget to use promo code BLEAV, BELIEVE, for your welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, the game starts here. Folks, we have an amazing show today. I'm going to get the guests right on the air so you don't have to wait. Joining me today is retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut, attorney. Welcome to the show, Professor Mike Geary. Mike, welcome.
Bill, good morning. Good to see you. Thank you for having me on.
And the last minute addition today, we're thrilled to have her, Dr. Debbie Goodman from St. Thomas University in sunny Miami, a criminologist. Welcome to the show, Dr. Debbie Goodman. Welcome, Dr. Debbie.
Good morning, Sergeant Bill, Professor Mike, the viewers. Happy and healthy New Year to everyone.
Absolutely. You know, since these horrific attacks, we'll learn now this has moved from finding out who these people are to the investigation, the deep dive into this, the cooperation between law enforcement agencies, finding out, as some talking heads have said, going backwards, find out what Shamsud Din Jabbar, what he did prior to these attacks. Did he have help? Did he have others that were working with him? Where did he rent the truck? All of these things, did someone rent the truck for him and pass it on to him? All of these things are important. And when and where did he get radicalized? Those are some of the questions we have. Professor Mike, your
Yeah,
thoughts?
Bill, like you said before, you have the event, but you got to go backwards. The 80% of the investigation still has to be conducted. And in this case, it's going to be a lot of electronics. You're going to be looking at his cell phone. You're going to be looking at his laptop. Who is he? What sites has he visited? How did he get radicalized? He was a native-born American, and he was radicalized to jihadist ways. And he went over to the other side, and he's an Islamic terrorist right now. He's an American-born Islamic terrorist. And so you have that. You got to go back and look at all of those things in his past, go all the way back to maybe the time he was, say 18 years old. You got to do the same thing now, in this case, with the new person here in the Las Vegas Tesla explosion. Who are they? They are not releasing his name right now, but you got to go backwards. You got to figure out at what point did these two people intersect in their lives? If possible, did they intersect? Now, how did they intersect? Who were they? Who were their Confederates? You got to look at that. So a lot of work left to do.
Dr. Debbie, you know something? We were always taught, Mike and I are both 9/11 first responders, and we will always be proud of that. And also as every NYPD officer, and not just that, FBI, court officers, law enforcement, fire department, people from all over the world came to assist. And some of the things, the lessons we've learned, unfortunately, we're forgetting. Not us specifically, but law enforcement and government officials are forgetting that the threat is always there. And you must be more than diligent. You must be one step ahead of potential bad actors. Dr. Debbie.
100%. And again, time and place to acknowledge and thank and respect our first responders, past, present, future. And what you said at the onset, Sergeant Bill, is so true. The vulnerability, here we are ushering in the new year 2025, where each one celebrated in his or her own way with family, friends. And that's what was happening here on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. And did we think that somebody or a group would perpetrate this act of terror? So, the question is, are we always going to be on high alert? Even with my own family, friends, colleagues, and they ask me, what's your opinion just in general about crime? Well, the opinion is, I think a daily mantra, if you will, has to be safety, security, and survival. And what that would speak to is just one's ability to always be aware. And I like to share with friends and colleagues that simply if something doesn't look right, sound right, feel right, it's not right. The citizen does not have to be the detective. That's why we have both of you and all of the amazing experts in our field of law enforcement, nearly 1 million as we speak, local, state, and federal officers and agents who do so much for so many. But the vulnerability is real. And, the two categories as well, even though at the moment we think we're looking at domestic terrorism because the individual is a U.S. citizen perpetrating acts of terror against the U.S., whereas with 9/11, of course, we had, international terrorism, non-U.S. citizens. But nonetheless, here's what concerns me truly as we're moving into this new year. The good news about 2024, believe it or not, is that the murder rates were down, according to our uniform crime reports, by nearly 11 to 12%. But here's my concern. What is on the uptick in 2024 and potentially now are the mass murders. So what is going on and how are we to prevent this, I think, is part of today's conversation as well.
Absolutely. One of the things we were always taught also is hypervigilance. As a young cop, I was taught in the police academy, you're a cop now. You can't think like a civilian anymore. Put on your cop brain, put on your cop hat, and think like a cop. When you go into a restaurant with your wife, train your wife to know you get the seat facing the door. And my wife knows that. She never will take the seat facing the door. And that's just a little thing. But hypervigilance. And that expression that came from 9/11, if you see something, say something, is so, so important. And I think we cannot afford to get lax. When we get lax is when we get attacked. And something as simple as this, those ballards, look at that. Those ballards extended across the sidewalk on Bourbon Street may have prevented this attack. This is how the NYPD deals with blocking side streets. These are sanitation sand trucks. And they act as a twofold deterrent to a would-be vehicle attacker. A, no one's going to try to drive through these, 10-ton trucks or whatever their weight is. The other thing, if necessary, they can be moved so an emergency vehicle can drive through here. Very simple. So when you hear the New Orleans city officials, the elected officials say, oh, the ballards were being repaired, that is the lamest excuse I have ever heard in my life. We had a chief on the NYPD, chief of department, Louis Anamone, was one of the greatest chiefs in NYPD history, in my opinion. And he used to say, don't tell me what you can't do. Tell me what you can do. Mike.
Yeah, Billy, 9/11 is now almost 24 years ago. And whenever I do my national security class, I talk to my students about it. When I first started teaching, students remembered it a little bit as little kids. Now, all my students, none of them were ever born before 9/11. And so we're in that mindset where it's for us, we remember it. For them, they have no recollection. They are in a mindset of September 10th, 2001, before this all happened. You and I learned, and I always loved to have that gunfighter's seat in the restaurant so I could watch what's going on, and I remember September 11th, 7:45 in the morning, having a nice cup of coffee, this beautiful day in front of police headquarters, and 45 minutes later, mayhem struck. And your world is flipped upside down. You'll never forget it, and that's part of us. The younger people now, anybody who's a teenager or in their early 20s, has no recollection. So you have a large swath of the population that no longer has never been taught those lessons. In New Orleans, they've had a wonderful time in Mardi Gras, and they've got the Sugar Bowl. They've done it for years and years and years and years, and they've fallen into possibly that September 10th mentality. We have 100,000 people, visitors all over here, bars, restaurants, stadium. And it's been so good for so many years. They're not even making those barriers, the fixing of those barriers a priority. That's a September 10th, 2001 mentality. And sadly, we paid for it. And we paid for it with our own blood. And we have 15 people, I think, now have been declared dead because of what Jabbar did yesterday, the day before yesterday. So it's insane. So we have to get back to that mentality of watching everything. Everybody needs to have that cop mentality to say, what could possibly go wrong here in this situation? And we've learned that lesson maybe from what happened these last 2 days.
Absolutely. I want to play this from Fox News. This will bring us back to the issue of the ballards and why they weren't set up.
Let's bring back in Paul Morrow, Fox News contributor, former NYPD inspector, and an attorney, of course. Paul, what did you make of the news conference there? I was very interested to hear them repeatedly refer, or at least imply, that there are several other suspects here.
Yeah, that was the main takeaway, I think. And they did not caveat that, although they only seem to have indications of the fact that there are others involved. But the fact that they would come out so strongly and say, public, help us, lets me know that they right now might not have anything solid, at least as they went to press. But you can guarantee that they are scraping very hard at that. The way these things work now is that you work backwards. You want to see associations. My gut tells me they're seeing some associations. And Senator Kennedy's language seems to imply to me that he feels maybe there was a footprint that could have been picked up. If there are that many people involved, usually there's some indicia of a cell. There's always fraying at the edges. Certain things get out. And I'm wondering, and this is just speculation, I want to be clear, but given his body language and his language at the lectern, I'm wondering if they had some indicia, if there was something on the radar screen that maybe somebody wishes had been followed up. These things are very, very difficult to prevent. They always look good in 2020 hindsight, but it sounds like we may discover there's a lot more going on here than was initially indicated.
Nicole, we understand there are definitely more than one suspect. There could be more than two. They do not know. Of course, they're not going to give that information out because they are at the very...
This Inspector Paul Morrow from the NYPD, he's fantastic. He's one of the best talking heads I've heard on. He's an attorney. He's a retired NYPD inspector, very articulate, very knowledgeable. I know he worked in the intelligence division with the NYPD. One of the things, Dr. Debbie, we heard after 9/11 was there are people, law enforcement officers across this great country who just, their job is to infiltrate these chat sites and these dark websites and find out, you heard the term during 9/11, the chat. What's going on? What is the chat saying? These people give themselves up by talking about it amongst themselves because they think their computer's encrypted and no one can get in. So did we miss something? What was there no one hearing anything about what was about to happen? I think, just this is my gut as a cop, there was going to be an attack on the Sugar Bowl. This was just the preamble for that. The attack on Bourbon Street, and then they had the terrorists right there. They were, I believe, and look, I just have a gut feeling. And look, I always say to everyone on this earth, if your gut tells you something, go with it. Your instincts, we're from the animal kingdom. We're humans, but our instincts are just as good as any animal or better. So I have that instinct. I think they were planning to do something at the Sugar Bowl. Dr. Debbie.
I think you're right, Sergeant Bill, and I absolutely agree with going with the gut, and I enforce that as well with my students once again, so it doesn't look right, sound right, feel right, it's not right. But the question of did we miss something, I think in many ways, in so many of these just atrocious, horrendous cases, something may have been missed. But at the same time, I still want to always applaud and commend our law enforcement officials who are doing the very best they can. You know, I saw something that was just so moving on social media. It was just iPhone footage of when the officers actually saw that something was wrong on the Bourbon streets. Like 12 of them just ran toward, and it just gave me chills because it is that staunch reminder of how in the times of adversity and terror and trauma, you know, our local, state, and federal law enforcement officers are right there running toward whatever the chaos may be. And they themselves have their husbands, their wives, their children. And yet, who among us is running toward carnage and bullets and trauma but our law enforcement experts? So I never want to fault them, but the whole idea about information, knowledge, intelligence, I do think sometimes the signs are there. I'm also reading, Sergeant Bill, Professor Mike, as you all know, and the viewers, that a lot of these individuals who are participants in what potentially could be future domestic terrorist acts are really infiltrating the social media circuits, even going into video games to befriend and chat with younger and younger people, you know, in high school and college. So that's very concerning too, because it's almost like this recruitment process is happening in plain view.
You're 100% correct. I want to play this from CNN. This is John Miller a great reporter, a former NYPD commissioner, knows a great deal about terrorism and intelligence.
Intelligence analyst John Miller. He's getting some new reporting for us. John, what are you learning?
Well, Wolf, what we've been trying to do is develop a richer picture of who is the man behind this carnage in New Orleans. What do we know about him, and what can that tell us about motive? And what we've learned from multiple sources is that Mr. Jabbar apparently made, according to authorities, a series of voice recordings on video as he drove, they believe, from Texas to Louisiana to partake in these attacks, allegedly. The recordings talk about the turmoil in his family, the long-fought, bitter divorce he was going through. He discusses, according to officials briefed on the videos, where it appears they're made while he's driving, but it's in the dark, so you can't really see him on these videos, recorded apparently on his phone. But he talks about the idea of getting his family together for a celebration, which would have been a ruse so that he could kill all of them, but that over time, after having a series of dreams about joining ISIS, that he changed his plan to carry out this attack in New Orleans to create mass casualties in the name of ISIS. So what we're starting to see is an individual who was experiencing turmoil and stressors in life, who was going to act out in some kind of violent way, and at least according to what they believe are his own words, decided to do this as an alternative to killing his family. In the recordings, he also has a last will and testament where he divides up what little money he has left after all the financial losses and setbacks he had suffered to family members. So they're beginning to get a picture of what was going on, and it seems to be what was going on in the background of this individual's life that was as much of a driver as any commitment to terrorism.
Yeah, John Miller, great reporting as usual. Stand by.
So that just tells us something. Is ISIS recruiting people that are having mental health issues, that are angry, whose lives are falling apart? Is that the profile of someone that ISIS would recruit, Mike?
Yeah, Bill, if you read some of the literature about how they recruit in other countries like in the Middle East, they're looking for young men. First of all, they're looking for young men who are single, who don't have family, who don't have a lot of attachments, who may decide that they are in a vulnerable position to be spoken to, and they're vulnerable to suggestion. They're vulnerable to joining a group that is going to do something that is greater than themselves. And sometimes that could be, a patriotic thing, like after 9/11 attacks, people joined the military to protect our nation. So you want to that's part of a human instinct, is to take part in something that is bigger than yourself and that is meaningful to you. And so therefore you could look, it'll make you proud. Perhaps this guy himself was very vulnerable. John Miller seems to suggest he was. I wouldn't know how they would recruit him, maybe through contact with looking at last names, looking at people who are ex-military. Maybe he knows somebody who's recruiting for ISIS. But our strength, our technological strength, our internet, that's wonderful. We get news very quickly and from many different sources, but it is also a weakness that it can be used against us to recruit people like him. So he does fit the kind of vulnerable person profile that ISIS may be looking for. And in this case, they seem to struck gold with this one guy.
I think you're 100% correct. Dr. W, you said something before that actually gave me a little pause, and it's so true. There was a big poster after 9/11 that showed NYPD officers running toward the towers. And it said, while civilians ran away, we ran toward it. And that isn't just NYPD. That is law enforcement across this nation. And you saw, as you said, when that truck went around to the sidewalk, I saw about 12 officers running toward danger. How many people in their profession not just are required to do that, but don't hesitate to do that as sworn law enforcement officers do, Dr. Debbie?
Absolutely. And that's why, again, the real heroes of our country are our local, state, and federal officers, first responders, military men and women, even though we, the three of us, understand because of our studies, and the viewers are well versed as well. The terrorist mentality is they think that they're warriors and that they're heroes and that they're making sure they heighten the political and governmental postures and positions of whatever it is their ideology is. But you also said, Sergeant Bill and Professor Mike, at some point, these people become radicalized. Now, is there vulnerability? There is. But certainly the three of us are not vulnerable to anything like this, nor the viewers. So I feel as a criminologist, no matter what is presented to us, we as good citizens, good people, make good decisions. So somebody like Jabbar had to have believed in participating in this weapon of mass destruction. You know, this pickup truck is the weapon of mass destruction. And I also think that a lot of the ISIS mentality is a participant of the vehicles being used as the weapons, and not only the guns that he presented, but they'll know that it will end in their own demise, and they don't seem to care. Why? Because that's the heroic ideology they think they're participating in.
Look, this guy was loaded for bear, and after he committed his carnage, he got out of the vehicle, started firing at officers, and he was met with gunfire, and they took him out. And had they not been prepared to do that, had they not acted so quickly, so diligently, we could have had more people struck and killed by this guy, but law enforcement quickly moved in. And for that, I think all of us really have to be thankful. Professor Mike.
Yeah, Billy, this guy was on a mission. Shamsud Din Jabbar was on a mission, a jihadist mission. And so he was loaded for bear, as you say. He had improvised explosive devices. I'm thinking something like a small hand grenade he could throw, maybe homemade. He had weapons. He had ammunition. He was on he was going to kill himself. He was on that, suicide mission. He was going to take out as many people as he wanted, as he possibly could. He knew he wasn't going to walk away from this. He was willing to shoot it out. He didn't run away. You could see where his body fell in some pictures. He's right by his truck. He was going out, Ali Akbar, and he was going to take as many people as he could. And that is, so that shows you the dedication that these people have. They are, they're willing to lay down their life for their jihadist mentality, and they don't mind taking out little children, young adults, pregnant women, moms, grandfathers. They don't care. Anybody that they could take out, the body count is what's important to them. And that's really sick. But these guys are loaded for bear. They're ready to go to their death, killing as many as they can.
Absolutely. From the chat, Mac Carr, what about the two men and one woman seen placing IEDs around the French Quarter? So there are others involved in this horrific thing. Mac Carr, CNN reported that that's been checked out. Those people have been interviewed and they have been cleared. So that doesn't mean there aren't others involved, but apparently maybe the FBI spoke too soon. And we're awaiting a live press conference from the FBI. As soon as it comes on live, I'm going to go right to it. But I just want to mention, look, it's so important to understand, and many people said it yesterday, this press conference is going to start. I'm going to go right to it now.
All right. Y'all all ready? We good? All right, well, good morning. I first want to start off by reminding the citizens of Louisiana that as you travel around the state, you will see the flags of all state buildings at half-mast in honor of those lives that were lost in this horrific act of violence. I also think that it's important to remember that what happened yesterday was akin to those who are old enough to remember jigsaw puzzles, and that you would take 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle and you empty the box, and you've got to start sifting through those pieces, and you want to start if you're real good, you start at the corners, right? Try to put your corners together. And from yesterday to today, over 1,000 law enforcement agents and officers, men and women, have been poring over countless amounts of data, of videos, of surveillances, interviews, tracking down every possible lead that came to us, whether it was the New Orleans Police Department, the Louisiana State Police, the FBI, or our other federal agencies. Also yesterday, I issued an emergency declaration. That declaration was meant to streamline resources and communications between state, local, and federal partners. And we're seeing the results of it. I also would like to remind everyone that what's going on in this city and this state is twofold. We've got an active criminal investigation going on, while we're also continuing to secure the city of it. I also would like to remind everyone that what's going on in this city and this state is twofold. We've got an active criminal investigation going on, while we're also continuing to secure the city in preparation for 3 o'clock kickoff time for the Sugar Bowl. With that, I would also remind those who are in the city that as far as state resources are concerned, we have the Louisiana State Police, the Louisiana National Guard, which was part of that emergency declaration, which allowed us to put an entire MP company on the ground. Those become force multipliers, is what we call that in law enforcement and the military. That helps to add to the resources that we have. Wildlife and Fisheries, the Department of Corrections, DSF, DHS, our Veterans Affairs, our Probation and Parole, all state agencies. Any state agency who has a post-certified officers are here in this city to help secure the city. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to Christopher Rea, who is the Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI's Counter Terrorism Division. Chris?
Thank you, Governor Landry. Good morning. I am FBI Deputy Assistant Director Christopher Rea. I'm from our Counterterrorism Division at headquarters. I'm also joined by Assistant Special Agent in Charge Alethea Duncan from our New Orleans office, who you heard from yesterday. I'm here to discuss not only the latest investigative information we have here in New Orleans, but I'll also let you know about other investigative activities outside of the state. I first, and most importantly, want to send our deepest condolences to the victims of this horrific attack and their loved ones. 14 innocent victims were killed in this senseless attack, and at least 35 are injured. We cannot ease the grief people in this community and across the nation are feeling at this time, but rest assured, we stand with you and in support of you. All the resources, and I'm going to go into that a little bit later, all the resources of the FBI are being focused on tracking down every piece of evidence, every lead, every interview, every potential lead we've got. While I won't be able to answer all your questions today, my goal is to be as forthcoming as possible with you on what we've uncovered so far. First and foremost, let me be very clear about this point. This was an act of terrorism. It was premeditated and an evil act. This was obviously a critical incident, and with that, lots of information and tips come pouring in from law enforcement, first responders, and the public. We have been aggressively running down these tips and information. As you all know, that takes time, and we will continue to do so until every lead has been followed through on. This investigation is only a little more than 24 hours old. So So I ask you to keep in mind that as I go through some of the specifics later. But at this point, currently, and this is another another fact I want to be clear on, we do not assess at this point that anyone else involved in this attack is involved in this attack except for Shamsud Din Jabbar, the subject you've already been briefed on. A little bit about what the FBI is doing. So we are surging people and assets to the area from across the region and across the nation. Special agents in multiple field offices across the country have been deployed and are assisting with potential aspects of this investigation and following up on every lead. Additional teams of special agents, professional staff, and victim specialists continue to arrive to provide more investigative power and assistance to the victims and their families. We've also forward deployed a number of our critical incident response group assets, including members of our hostage rescue team, special agent bomb technicians, and crisis management coordinators. In addition, we have deployed more evidence response technicians to continue to process the various scenes that we have. So far, we have received just over 400 tips from the public, and that information is being followed up on both here in New Orleans and across the country. Some of the tips are here in New Orleans, and there are other tips in other states across the country that we are following up on. The FBI team and our law enforcement partners here are also reviewing hundreds of hours of surveillance and other video from both the French Quarter and other locations. As for a timeline, at this point, investigators believe Jabbar picked up the rented F-150 in Houston, Texas on December 30th. He then drove from Houston to New Orleans on the evening of the 31st, and he posted several videos to an online platform proclaiming his support for ISIS. There were 5 videos posted on Jabbar's Facebook account, which are time-stamped beginning at 1:29 a.m. and the last at 3:02 a.m. In the first video, Jabbar explains he originally planned to harm his family and friends, but was concerned the news headlines would not focus on the, quote, war between the believers and the disbelievers, end quote. Additionally, he stated he had joined ISIS before this summer. He also provided a will and testament. FBI and ATF. FBI, we have a couple different scenes at the location. We have released the scene at Bourbon Street. That scene has been released. We also have a scene off of Mandeville Address where we're currently searching that scene right now. FBI and ATF agents have secured that house, and that location is being searched for potential evidence. On New Year's morning, Jabbar opened fire after ramming through a blocked-off area of Bourbon Street, used his truck as a weapon to run over the victims. Teams of specially trained victim specialists, again, as I said, are on the ground here in New Orleans, assisting survivors of the attack and loved ones of the deceased. We do not believe the public is in any danger around any of these locations. 3 phones linked to Jabbar have been recovered, and digital media exploitation is a priority to see what is on the devices and determine if there are any other potential leads. Additionally, we have recovered 2 laptops and are currently reviewing them for any potential leads. Those laptops were recovered at the Mandeville address. Evidence technicians will also be going over the F-150 truck Jabbar was driving. As you know, we recovered an ISIS flag from the back of the vehicle. Jabbar declared his support for the terrorist group on social media, as I stated before, as he made his way to New Orleans. FBI bomb technicians also recovered 2 IEDs in coolers, one from the cross-section of Bourbon and Orleans Street, and the second at an intersection approximately 2 blocks away. There were multiple reports of other devices. Those reports turned out to be misinformation or not actual functioning devices. Those are the only 2 devices that we've been able to recover that were functional. Both devices were rendered safe on scene. We did obtain surveillance footage showing Jabbar placing the devices where they were found. Two other, as I said before, 2 other items of interest were determined not to be IEDs. A little bit about Jabbar. Jabbar himself was born in the United States and is a U.S. military veteran. We are looking in everything in his life. While we have interviewed many people who know Jabbar, we still need to talk to others. Whether you know Jabbar personally, worked with him, served in the military, or saw him in New Orleans or Texas, we need to talk to you. You may not think you have relevant information, but what you know could tie in to one of our investigative leads. Specifically, we want to talk to anyone who was in the French Quarter on New Year's Eve or early on New Year's Day. That includes people spotted near one of the 2 IEDs on Bourbon Street. The IED was inside a cooler, and many people stopped and looked at the cooler and then continued on their way. Let's be clear again. We do not believe at this point these people are involved in this incident in any way. We want to speak to them as witnesses and want to know what they saw and when. I went down to the crime scene last night. It is very hard to put into words what it looked like and how difficult it was to see. Anyone with information can call us at 1-800-CALL-FBI or send digital tips to fbi.gov/Bourbon Street attack. Early this morning, evidence response teams finished their work at the crime scene. Bourbon Street has been turned over to the city of New Orleans. As you know, there's also an FBI investigation in Las Vegas. We are following up on all potential leads and not ruling everything out. However, at this point, there is no definitive link between the attack here in New Orleans and the one in Las Vegas. And again, as I close, I'll preface everything with what I started with in the beginning, which was this is very early in an investigation like this. Again, our thoughts and prayers are with the victims of this tragedy and everyone impacted across the country. They remain at the heart of our investigation. I also, although I've only been on the ground here a short time, I also want to express a sincere appreciation for our partners here, which include the U.S. Attorney's Office, HSI, ATF, the New Orleans PD, the Louisiana State Police, the Governor's Office, and countless others. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to the Special Agent in charge of ATF here, Josh Jackson.
Hey, good afternoon. As stated, my name is Joshua Jackson. I am the Special Agent in charge for the ATF New Orleans Field Division. And ATF's primary mission is preventing, reducing, and solving violent crime throughout the United States and abroad. Solving part is the focus of this investigation. ATF resources that have been brought to bear to the city and to focus with our federal, state, and local partners have been our national response team. We spoke about the scene that's still being processed now. The national response team of ATF is a team of certified fire investigators, certified explosive specialists, fire engineers, electrical engineers. These folks will give us additional investigative leads to help the investigative team identify what happened at the location in Mandeville and identify how that fire started and move the investigation forward from there. Additional resources that ATF has brought to bear into the city as our ATF special response team. This is a tactical team capable of handling any sort of enforcement operation. This team is deployed, on set, and ready for the Sugar Bowl today. This team is also made available to the Louisiana State Police and also New Orleans Police Department to assist with any efforts that they may have during this period. Additional resources, as the governor alluded to, he executed executive powers and had an emergency declared to where ATF was able to tap in to Emergency Support Function 13 resources. This allowed us to bring additional explosive detection canines so that we can safely sweep the city and safely sweep the Super Bowl in preparation for the game today. These resources will still be in the city as we lead up to the Super Bowl and through Mardi Gras. These type of ATF resources will be here. The last resources ATF has brought to bear, and probably the most important one, is our victim witness coordinators. These folks come in and they provide resources to the victims and the family members that have suffered greatly during this tragedy. The entire city hurts, but the victims and the family members are in need of resources and care long after this investigation wraps up. This time next year to be hard for the families and friends who suffered during this event. So our victim witness coordinators are working with the FBI, the city of New Orleans coordinators to provide resources to these folks out here. And as we move forward, ATF will be committed. We will work with the investigative team moving this investigation forward, but also we'll be here to make sure the city is safe and prepared as we move into the Super Bowl. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our mayor of this great city, New Orleans. Madam Mayor.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, good morning once again. And I just want to just echo my thank yous to the unified command of our law enforcement partners and at every single level, federal, state, and governor. Governor, thank you for your partnership. Yeah, thank you. I also want to thank the residents and the visitors of the city of New Orleans for your patience, for your support, and most of all, your prayers. Our hearts and prayers continue to go out to the victims' families. And the city of New Orleans, we're resilient. And as I stated on yesterday, my focus in terms of a priority has been on our victims. As you heard, that yes, the FBI was able to clear Bourbon Street. And what that meant also for me in this city was that we were able to remove our victims, identify them, and notify their families. Real reverence. They mattered, the families matter, and matter to the city of New Orleans. In addition to that, I want to just thank again our federal partners in Washington, listening to my plea personally for the additional resources to allow for the scene to be cleared, and again, attending to our victims. I walked by each one and I did the sign of cross in my own way because reverence, again, is important. So while we have been able to have Bourbon Street returned back to the city of New Orleans, and the due diligence has been done, that then allowed me to give the go-ahead to begin the cleaning of Bourbon Street. That started happening in the morning about 2 a.m. It was completed before 8 a.m. this morning. But that has really set the tone, I would say, and with the confidence that I have in the law enforcement partners, all of the resources that have been activated, how we have made sure that safety continues to be our top priority, how our assets have been deployed strategically, again, for the safety and the protection of our visitors and our residents in the city. And because of that, the confidence is there to reopen Bourbon Street.
I don't think we need to keep listening. This is where the politics come in, and let's talk about what the FBI said. And again, Mike, you, I, Dr. Debbie know 24 hours is not a long time for an investigation, and to find out the truth in 24 hours very, very difficult, because invariably incorrect information is reported, incorrect information is followed up. All the leads you follow up, the reason you follow up leads is to determine whether or not they're true or not. So many things will change over as time, as you can assign detectives, FBI agents, ATF agents to interview people. And the other thing, this is why this somewhat mirrors the response to the Boston Marathon bombing. You ask the public for help. How many people perhaps have cell phone video that show the perpetrator prior to the dastardly act of driving that truck onto Bourbon Street, putting a cooler with IEDs? Is there video of that? Were there other people involved? I think it really is too early for the FBI to say across the board, no one else was involved. And sometimes that can be politically pushed by the powers that be. Declare he was the only one. He was a lone wolf. People in the chat are saying he's connected to the Las Vegas bomber, the Tesla that exploded in front of Trump's building. I would not be surprised if there is a nexus between that event and this. However, they're saying right now, no, but it's too early to say that. It's only been 24 hours. Professor Mike.
Yeah, Bill, they want the FBI and probably the ATF. They seem very anally retentive. They will not say anything. They will not go out on a limb even 1 inch unless they have every single facet of this relationship, locked down. We know that that these are probably, this is not a coincidence that you have an attack 3 a.m. on January 1st and you have an attack 8 a.m. like on January 2nd. And so therefore, to say that there's no connection, he should have said there's no connection that we can actually nail down right now. However, we're still working on it, and then talk about this coincidence that is not just a coincidence. That is probably coordinated, but they don't want to do that, and that's sad because it really does not give the public a lot of confidence in what they're doing, because the public is like, hey, I see a connection. I mean, it's as plain as the nose on your face. How come you don't see it? They don't want to admit it until they have everything nailed down to the nth degree. We do know the person's name in the Las Vegas Cybertruck bombing. He's dead now. We know that there is some connection with Jabbar. We know that the two vehicles were rented from a common website, and that they could track how they came to be in Las Vegas and in New Orleans. I'm sorry, in Las Vegas through the charging station data that they get off the Cybertruck. So, I know they want to be careful with their words, but the problem is when they're so careful that they do not want to commit to anything and then follow it up by saying, we're still ongoing. It's only been 24 hours, people. It kind of misleads the public and gives the public like a false sense of, what are they doing? So the ATF guy, forget about that. The mayor, forget about her. This is all politics stuff. The FBI guy, he tried his best, but it's way too early in the investigation to, for people to make up their mind. 24 hours from now, we might have another attack. We might have a lot more information. It's difficult for people to be patient because, remember the Koberger case. After 1 month, they're saying it's a cold case. These things take time, and they've developed a lot of information in 24 hours, but people have to realize, what law enforcement agency you're dealing with. You're dealing with the FBI. It's much different than dealing with the NYPD. Patience right now is needed more than anything else. They're working quickly, but the reporters and the public need patience.
From the chat, Sunset Gazing, both military, and of course he's comparing the New Orleans Shamsud Din Jabbar with the person who exploded the Cybertruck in Las Vegas. Both have ties to Fort Bragg. Both rented from using the Turo app, and that's only on the surface. Sunset Gazing, we're preaching to the choir. And again, we said it's too early to clean that slate and say there's no connection whatsoever. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. If you like real crime, true crime, from a police perspective, you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed, hit that red subscribe button on the screen. Give us a thumbs up, ring that bell, share us with your friends and your family. And if you want to contribute to us financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels. And we also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels, and you can join the police off the cuff family if you like true crime from a police perspective. Dr. Debbie, I mean, I think in this country, and we've lost a lot of confidence in the FBI over the past few years, and not totally unwarranted. It was always said when we were on the NYPD that the NYPD and the FBI didn't play well in the sandbox together, and I think there's still some truth to that, because I think the organization that heralds itself as the greatest law enforcement agency in the world may have been compromised by vis-a-vis politics, too much politics. And politicians don't belong running a law enforcement agency. Law enforcement does. Your comments, Dr. Debbie.
Right. And to that, Sergeant Bill, I actually have a thought or a question for you and Professor Mike, as well as the viewers, if they want to answer in the chat. But on the politics side of this, do you think that it is appropriate to continue with and maintain this schedule for this football game that's to occur today? Is that the right thing to do in the aftermath of this type of terrorist tragedy? Or is it better to yield and pause?
I believe it's important to go forward with your life and not to give in to the terrorists, and use whatever resources you need to make that game safe. Bring in the National Guard. Bring in, bring in whatever resources you need. Make it safe. Show the terrorists we're not threatened by you, and if they could shut the world down just with threats. So I think, look, after 9/11, Giuliani said we're good. They had every single event that was scheduled. They didn't cancel a single event. And that sent a message, not just to the terrorists, but to the world, that we're not backing down. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, Bill, you can't let them win. No matter what, you have to go on. It's dangerous. Life has always been dangerous. We're just asleep at the switch before 9/11. And in the past 20 years, we've kind of fallen into a nap again. So this will wake people up, but you can't let them win. They win if they change your life. And compromise our ideals. So no matter what, we have to continue. And as you say, you modify whatever plans you have for security. And maybe a lot of people may stay home, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, the show has to go on. We have to live our lives, or else they win. And I'm damned if I'm going to let these people win.
And I agree with that. I would just want to make sure 110% that, back to the early conversation at the beginning of the discussion of safety, security, survival, that venue will be 100% safe for every individual attending. And then back to the issue that you both presented about, is there not a correlation between New Orleans and Las Vegas? Too early to tell, too early to call it, but my gut tells me there is, because of the affiliation and the association between these two individuals, having both been affiliates of the Army and the rental cars of the same place. I'm also reminded of a time like this of a Timothy McVeigh and Oklahoma City bombings and the sniper from Fort Bragg. And so I wonder if part of this conversation moving forward is just once again about mental health and why some of these people are deciding to take whatever they think is their ideology and victimize innocent people.
No, look, I think that you send a message through strength rather than weakness. And if you back down to these people, there's been a lot of weakness shown in the past. And we can't show that. We have to show strength. I want to play this little bit from News Nation.
Of the FBI counter drone unit, Rob D'Amico, who's now a security consultant. Rob, man, a lot has come out and developed since you and I were on air with this breaking news first thing yesterday morning. In New Orleans, you and I were wondering if this guy had acted alone or not. How significant is it that authorities have come out and said they don't believe he was a lone wolf?
Yeah, I think it is significant. I know that the original information that got them looking at that was where ID devices were located in New Orleans. They were looking at a video that had people around those that they thought may have planted those for him. They have supposedly since said those people weren't involved. They interviewed them and they didn't figure that they were involved. But if the subject didn't plant them, then who did? Like, they have to really figure out a timeline. If he was able to plant these devices, go back, get his truck, and then do the deadly run that he did, or was he being helped? So I think they're still keeping that wide aperture open and trying to figure out how those devices got into other places where he may not have been.
Yeah. And we've also learned so much more about this man since yesterday morning. Of course, we know a name. We also, it's shocking the fact that he served in our army from 2007 to 2020. I believe he was deployed to Afghanistan. Where do things go wrong there for someone who was on the front lines for the United States of America to then turning around and doing this to innocent people? How do you become radicalized by ISIS?
Well, I mean, they're very good at it. They take people that want to blame other people, and then they focus them saying that this is the reason you have your problems. And a lot of these groups do that. You look at cults, you look at white supremacy groups. They all want to gather you and whatever problems you're having. And he did start having problems like in the real estate market, losing money, had problems with his family. I think there could be a complex mental health issue. Did the mental health issue come slightly before it, then him get radicalized, or was his mental health issues because he was being radicalized? Because at one point, I think he talked about gathering his family and then murdering his family. That's not a sane, obviously, thought. And then they turned it this way. So how did that develop? They're going to have to really look at all his electronics, all his postings, his social media, if they can get into his phone, get his encrypted apps like Telegram and Discord, and see what he was talking about, and watch that slide from that time he was somewhat normal, where his friends and family say he was, to what happened yesterday.
Yeah.
So, as we said, it's so early in this investigation, and many people have opinions, but we can't just afford to have opinions. We have to have facts. And as we can see, and as I see some people talking about in the chat, many of the things that we heard are just not true. So as we move forward in the investigation, the truth will come out, and we'll find out more in regards to this investigation. Professor Mike, your final thoughts.
Bill, I just want to cite to a listener, DCPNW, thumbs up to you. She said, DCPMW said, keep calm and carry on. That comes from Churchill during the darkest days of World War II and the Battle of Britain in 1940. He or she's absolutely right, DCPNW. Keep calm, carry on. You carry on with your life. That's strength. You don't project weakness, you project strength. So that's what we need to do.
Absolutely. Dr. W, your final thoughts.
Certainly. Well, my thoughts, my prayers, my respect and condolences to the victims' families. I agree. Strength and solidarity, very important. I'm hopeful that the answers will come. I'm sure they will in the upcoming days as to who is this individual and what was his real intent and were others involved. But my hope as well is that moving forward in the calendar year, that we can have strategies to prevent these mass massacres. And I'm hopeful that with all of the good intent of our local, state, and federal officers and citizens working together, we can prevent this moving forward.
Absolutely. Folks, I want to thank everyone for tuning in today. We want everyone to have a wonderful 2025. It didn't start in such a wonderful way, but have faith, prayers for the people from New Orleans, and hopefully with the partnership of all the different law enforcement agencies, we'll get the truth, what actually happened. And if you're not subscribed, hit that red subscribe button on the screen. Folks, have a great day. God bless, and we'll see you next time.
One episode just ain't enough.